I think that maybe some people that are just solo founders are unwilling to face the reality of how hard it is to collaborate and to bring people into their orbit. And so they stop and convince themselves they don't need to.
On this show, we're going to sit down and talk about the metamorphosis that happens when you become a leader.
We'll share our biggest wins and our losses and interview other leaders to find out how they stay in charge without losing their minds.
I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Zach. Welcome to the Who's in Charge podcast.
Welcome to the Who's in Charge podcast. I am very excited to have our guest on with us today, Mr. Josh Stech from Sundae. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited. I love the novel format, so I'm excited to see how this goes.
You've never
keep you on your toes.
You've never been a third wheel with Zach and I before?
I never have, although I do hope this happens more often in the future. Leads to many dinners and fun times. But no, never. I think it's a great concept, though, and I wish my wife could have joined, but I'm happy to be here.
We'll do a round two.
Well, yeah, exactly. We'll do a round two. Hope maybe in person. I would love to hang out with your wife too. Well, you know, as you know, the theme and the kind of topics that we talk about here on the podcast are all about, you know, leadership and building businesses and building teams and kind of the journey of that, but then also the personal journey of rising to the occasion and being the one who's running the show, both, you know, at work and then also at home, and kind of how this all comes together into a somewhat semblance of normalcy for all of us. The entrepreneurs' normalcy is obviously different than the non, but I'm excited to kind of dig in a little bit to your story and your journey that got you here. You've accomplished a lot. You started right out of undergrad, which I think is a really cool thing, and you've come a super long way, raised a bunch of money, got involved in the venture capital side of things, invested in businesses, started several. So I want to dig in there and hear kind of maybe a little bit from the beginning.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to go wherever you'd like to with the conversation, and maybe I won't go all the way back to when I was a child because that's an ugly story. But but yeah, I mean, I'm happy to maybe just share a little bit. I'll make it brief on my background, but maybe that's a good place to start. Yeah. I grew up in San Diego. Was just at a very normal upbringing. I like to say that. You know, in terms of nature versus nurture, I'm a big nurture guy. I think that my upbringing had everything to do with my success now today, my confidence, what I thought was possible. So I'm taking that very seriously with my three kids now. So I was very fortunate to have a super solid household that never said, you know, never made me think I could do anything other than just everything I wanted. And so that was where it started. And that mentality led me to Stanford, where I was fortunate enough to get in. Did that undergrad and grad, and I always had a fascination with the real estate market, and actually ended up writing my honors thesis on the subprime lending crisis at the time because it was 2009, and I just wanted to know what was going on. And that, believe it or not, is sort of what led me to realize this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I mean, yes, on the one hand, a lot of people are suffering. On the other, I think there's an opportunity to not only help people, but build a good business at the same time. So I moved out to Las Vegas where, you know, prices had dropped in some areas of Vegas, 75% from the peak. It was just the time to buy. Like, you could buy a home for less than you could build it. And so we started buying, fixing, and flipping houses. And I say we, it's actually my dad was my capital partner. And I was the on the ground, boots on the ground that didn't really know what he was doing. But
was he in real estate too? Or was he in real estate, or how was, yeah.
Not really. Yeah, he was a corporate America guy for a long time. Eastman Kodak Company, Walt Disney Company. He had a bit of startup experience, and then he had done some investing, but never really like full-time operating real estate. So he was just always eager to kind of back me in whatever I wanted to do.
Okay, nice. Nice to have a capital partner when you're starting.
Good to have yes, exactly. It is hard to just bootstrap your way to a business. I got to tell you. But so, you know, again, to sort of fast forward a little bit, I started fixing and flipping homes, buying, renovating, and leasing some, and ultimately realized that was a it was a little more active of a business than I wanted to be in at the time. I saw that lending was an opportunity, specifically on the hard money side, and really switched my entire operation and fund structure to a lending one. And this was now, I'm been mid 20s, 3 years into the flipping business, and just started lending. That then led me to start my first technology company, which is really a group effort among a few friends called Lending Home, which is now Kiavi, which many of the listeners may know about. And that was really just taking what I had been doing over a couple year period on the hard money, kind of traditional, just, find a flipper and structure a deal. And it wasn't super scalable, and taking it to Silicon Valley where, venture capital can really set an idea like that on fire. So I was 5.5 years there. We can talk about the pivot to Sundae. I pivoted out of Lending Home and towards Sundae.com. And that's where we are today. We're almost 6.5 years into that business, and it has been an incredible ride. We've raised a lot of money, and I think have made a lot of positive impact on sellers and buyers alike.
It's pretty amazing, like, transitions that you've had there. We talk a lot about the idea of everybody can come up with ideas, but it's about execution. But I do think also, like, being able to recognize, you seem to have a knack for being able to recognize opportunity and to be able to capitalize on that. How do you have a process that you're going through to be like, to recognize where these opportunities are?
Oh, that I hadn't really ever thought about that. So that's a great question. I definitely, again, I guess I was taught young that there's no losses in life. There's only lessons. That was a big thing growing up. It was, there's wins and then there's lessons. There's just no losses. And that led me to definitely try a lot and experiment a lot. And everything just felt like I was a little closer to what I was supposed to be, even if it felt like it was a step in the wrong direction. So I've been big in business on intuition, very big on I'm not particularly religious, but I call it faith, and it's my business faith, which is that I have faith that if I see something and I validate it enough that even though I don't have all the pieces, that I'll figure it out along the way. So I definitely don't tend to overanalyze. I know most things are two-way doors. You can step through them. You can come right back. Great Jeff Bezos sort of concept. So I guess I definitely don't overthink it. And that doesn't mean I'm always right. That's for sure. But it doesn't stop me. I'm not scared of making decisions, I guess.
I think that is a really important leadership trait to move from idea to execution quickly. Right? Like, how quickly can you bridge that gap? We can all sit and think indefinitely and have the best ideas and then actually never execute on them. Right? And I've noticed that the best builders and the best leaders are the ones who just are able to make that transition as quickly as possible and at least get started. You don't have to get to the end of the execution right away, but you do have to move in that direction as quickly as possible, or the opportunity kind of passes you by.
Yeah. There's now that I was listening to you and thinking about the question, there is a framework, I guess, that we use, not at like big, well, I guess we'd use it at big pivot points too, but we use it all the time. So I guess I'll just share this. It's called the 4S framework. And so it's sensing, seeking, solving, starting. And so every sort of decision that we make, we try to go through this framework. And if it's a big decision, the longer, the sort of the framework process. But so the first is sensing. It's what's going on, right? And that's largely that's a qualitative and quantitative exercise, but largely it's quantitative. It's like, all right, what are the numbers showing us, right? And I think a lot of us can probably relate to having dashboards in business and sensing things are happening. The next is seeking, which is really more of a qualitative exercise, some quantitative, but why is it happening? I know what's happening, and now it's why, because you can't really address the what, because you're not looking at root causes, right? You're looking at symptoms. So the seeking is a big piece. And then once you feel like I know what's happening and why, you move on to solving, which is the part we all want to do quickly, is brainstorming. It's exciting. It's new ideas. It's, how fast can you enumerate a list of 15 ways to solve this problem? And ultimately making a decision. And then the final S is starting, which is, all right, we thought something was happening. We think we know why. We have a solution that we want to implement. Now, who's going to do what by when? And I guess one thing I've learned, as we make a lot of decisions to iterate quickly as a startup, is the faster and better you are at going through that, right? Which is really a function of how good your dashboarding is, how disciplined you are as executors, and how good of a team you have. The more likely you are to get it right, because you aren't always going to get it right. And the last thing I'll say is, if you're ever, if you're ever in a meeting and you're having a disagreement and it really feels like you're on a different page, often it's because you're talking to somebody who's on a different S. A lot of people like to jump right into solving, and they just really don't care for the sensing or seeking part. They just want to brainstorm. A lot of people get really, really trapped in the sensing, and they don't understand that it doesn't matter how much you understand about what's happening until you understand why and what to do about it. So I often go back to that and just say, hey team, which S are we on? Because it feels like we're in a different part of the cycle.
I think that's really clarifying to think about where everybody at the same table as you is in their brain. And I bet you everybody at the table has a different preference, like their strong suit, right? And then bringing them all together to be on the same page and solving for the proper S. How quickly after starting do you go back to sensing?
Yeah, you do want to give new ideas a chance to breathe. And I think especially in the real estate business, again, I'm sure a lot of people can relate. It's a small N business. There's not a lot of data points often. If you're doing direct to seller marketing, you can be spending a lot of money and still only get 100 or 200 leads. And, whereas in some businesses, where you have millions of data points, like some of these, if I'm selling razor blades or toothpaste, I might have thousands of customers a day. That's just not how real estate is. So I do think it's dangerous to ask to open up that decision-making process too often. But I think you need to be willing to open it up as often as it needs to, which is a terrible sort of like dichotomy and limbo. But I think that's really where you need to trust yourself and your team to know when the right time is. But I will say, once you start something, we typically set a check-in point based on how big and consequential was the decision, how much confidence did or didn't we have, how much impact could it have. And then it's like, hey, let's try like heck, not to check in before we agreed when we started this thing to check in, but all rules are flexible.
Right.
Yeah, there's plenty of nuance. I think, first of all, when you start deciding when you're going to check in next is obviously super important. And I think it's important, I'll speak for myself, because I like to check, and I can overcheck. It's like when you try to let a plant grow and you like dig up the seed and you just sprout and then you put it back down and you dig it. Like obviously you're not going to let the thing sprout if you keep digging it back in. So I think it's really helpful for me personally to say like, okay, I'm going to reassess this depending on whatever it is in 2 weeks or in a quarter, or, like some decisions take a little bit longer to come back to the sensing part. And it's hard because it's hard to teach people how to do that properly because there's under pressure, with you as the CEO or a leader on your team, like they want to perform quickly, and it's teaching that patience and that diligence can sometimes be really challenging, of like just waiting until the time to check versus responding to the emergency that happens in the middle of the process. This is a challenge.
It is a huge challenge. I mean, because creative, smart people have a million ideas all the time, and they all sound good. And as entrepreneurs, I think we're leaders in. We're big dealers in hope. Like that's what I deal every day. Is I deal hope. So I always want to tell people their ideas are great, and I want to give them a chance, and I want to budget, fund that project or fund this project. I mean, the discipline to stay focused is one of the hardest parts about business.
Yeah, for sure. Lending Home had an awesome exit and, is now Kiavi. How did you know when the right time was there to exit and to move on to the next opportunity, and how much gap was there between those two things?
Yeah, so my personal exit from that business was distinct from any kind of business exit. It was about 5.5 years in, and I realized that I thought we had done a really good job solving the need of capital for property investors. I thought we nailed it. And
you did.
The question at that was that?
I said you did. It was great.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, and you look now today, I think Lending Home, that is, or Kiavi is the largest lender by 4 or 5 times, doing $8 billion a year. So we really did. And so I guess I was right at the time. We had solved that problem. We really did nail it. And we were at a bit of a fork in the road. It's how do we continue to scale this business? Is it to open new mortgage verticals like consumer mortgage, or do we do something different? And we just had a bit of a difference of opinion at many levels in the company. My strong opinion was that we should continue serving the property investor customer with more of what they need. And at the time, I thought that we had moved from, a distressed market after the great financial crisis that was opportunity was everywhere in terms of property, and capital was limited. And that was the problem. And we solved that. The market had totally changed over 5.5 years that we were working on Kiavi, because it had now become a supply constrained market. And there's all this capital was available. Wall Street pipes were built that we had put together. And now investors were having a hard time finding the next deal. And so I just said, that's their number one need now. We should be using our kind of foothold in this market, this beachhead that we have with capital, and we should go solve the biggest need now, which is property. And ultimately that's why I started Sundae. So that was the pivot point. It was, if we aren't going to do that as a business here, I'm going to go do that thing that I'm passionate about over here. And I started Sundae.com, raised new rounds of venture capital, and built the business from the ground up.
I think this is interesting because sometimes inside of a company sprouts a very, very good idea that is not the core company focus, right? Like, so if Lending Home / Kiavi started a real estate acquisition arm, like that tree would grow and like tip over the core focus of that business. So you had to really identify, oh yes, this is a problem, but this is not this business's problem. This is a separate entire business and separate organization. And I'd love to dive into that a little bit more, because I think that happens a lot to us as investors and us as now entrepreneurs who got the bug and can see opportunity everywhere and want to do all the things all at once. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit more, but specifically, I think what you did really well here was start it completely fresh you as a CEO didn't do both, right? Like you weren't in both, you didn't have a foot in both companies. Like you just can't do that well. You had to, you identified it and you diagnosed all these things, and then you started a completely new tree with your completely new focus. So maybe you can walk us back to that decision.
This is, so I think that people tend to underestimate what it takes to build a real business around any given idea.
Yeah.
Because I think most people don't understand what it takes to build a real business. Let's just be honest, they don't. What they understand is what it takes to create a job for themselves. They really understand that well. And that's their lens. And so if they see a new idea, their decision-making process is, can I quickly turn this into a job for myself that maybe creates some active income? That's literally, well, they don't know it. They think that they're asking, can this be turned into a business? Or can I do this and can I build this business in addition to this other business? What they realize is they're just creating a bunch of jobs, and it's never gonna, and that's why they never build big business, and they always just sort of jump from one thing to another. I think that when you really do understand how much infrastructure goes around and how much thought and discipline goes around to building any business, you realize you really better be focused. And I've not done this well for a lot of my career. I mean, a couple examples. Just a couple examples along my sort of career. One was we did introduce a funding division of Sundae maybe 2 or so years in. It was called Sundae Funding. So we were doing the marketplace, and obvious opportunity was, if you're sourcing deals for property investors, why not just attach a loan? Of course. Well, there's different ways to do that. And I was in the mode of just doing everything myself, fully vertical, and not kind of partnering, not doing it. And so we created Sundae Funding, and it became a big lending company, but it really did distract us from the core mission of what we were trying to do at the marketplace, which was supply acquisition. We were not nearly big enough there to then go off and, meddle with something else. Now, we ultimately just sold the funding division to a very large private equity company, and it was a great outcome for us. But I did that because I realized after a little while, gosh, it's just cannibalizing the core business. We need to recapture that focus and some money back onto the balance sheet to keep growing. Another example of it that I can think of is actually Lending Home tried, after I left, to basically build, after maybe a year or so into Sundae, they realized maybe this is a thing, and they tried to build a wholesale marketplace. Well, guess what happened to that? Nobody remembers it. Nobody remembers what the name was because it doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, I think it really is. It's just so hard because you see opportunity, but you just have to really appreciate how much capital, and like human capital, strategic capital, financial capital is required to do anything at scale.
That's great. And I think about that sometimes too, with like all this massive growth that you've had, right? Like you must have had to have grown as an individual, as a leader. What it takes to lead an organization of 3 people, 10 people has got to be dramatically different, I would imagine, with 350. What did you find about that journey of who you had to become?
Steep. Yeah, well, I guess the process of becoming a leader, I guess it just never stops, you know. And I think the components that I feel like you have to sort of master to become a great leader. The first thing is you got to be able to lift people's vision to a higher height. Like that's the vision, the hope. As I said, I think it was Napoleon who said like leaders are dealers in hope. I always use that. You have to be able to create hope and excitement and so raising people's height. So picking their head up and helping them see the future, I think is like critical. But it gets more and more and more critical as you go along and build something bigger and bigger. It's very easy to just help people put one foot in front of another, but to really paint a compelling vision is really tough. I think then it really becomes like, for me, once I had a big enough vision and realized I could tell a story to bring people and capital around it, the next thing I guess I was really focused on was like, how do I get the most out of my people? And how do I raise their standard? And somebody who I've worked with for a long time, and I think Stephanie and I, you've worked with him a bit, Trevor. We've been going at this for 10 years across Kiavi and Sundae. And one thing I remember, early days of Lending Home, we would be, of course, working 7 days a week. We're in the office and we're whiteboarding all the time. And one thing that he told me, and I really just like, it stuck with me. He said, you get more out of me than any manager I've ever had. And he said, and it's not always fun, but truly, like when I go to bed at night, I feel like I got more done today than I have ever before. And it's rewarding. And so the process, you know, your job as a manager is not to be somebody's friend necessarily. You do need a good relationship, but your job is to get the most out of them possible. And so if you're not hearing things like that, like, man, you're tough to work for, but you get the most out of me, then you might not be pushing people to a new standard. So that kind of was the thing. After building vision, it's like, how do you just make people realize they could actually do a lot more?
I think a true measure of a fantastic leader is one that produces other leaders. And, getting to know you and your team a little bit more and seeing people follow you into multiple companies, but then also spin out and do their own and build their own companies and be their own entrepreneur later, I think is a testament to that.
Wow, well, that's nice of you to say. And that actually ties together to that prior point that so there's been a lot of people, Sundae and in Kiavi, I can count over a dozen of our team members who spun out to do their own venture capital backed big idea. One of them was we created when we were selling. So one of the things we did at Lending Home was we created a fractional note marketplace. So we would originate a loan and we would do a couple things with it. We'd either hold on to it in the fund that we had, we'd sell it whole loan to Wall Street, or we'd fractionalize it and sell it to a bunch of high net worths who would buy $1,000 increments of these loans. One of my favorite projects we ever did there. It was really cool and innovative. But anyway, in order to manage that complexity of how to sell those, and like we had to create a general ledger that really didn't exist, and this accounting system. And that ended up, Dimitri and Sam, who worked on that for us, ended up spinning out and creating a multi-billion-dollar business, I kid you not, just on that piece of technology. That's it.
Wow.
So
Specialized
so
ledger.
many of those examples. And it's like, so it's just, there's so, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I guess to answer your question, or to add to your point, it is really exciting when people take like what you've been doing, they get excited enough about it, they feel like they have the tools now to do their own thing, and they go do it. Another one, Splitero. I mean, Michael Gifford had worked for me for over 8 years between Kiavi and Sundae, and ultimately decided there was an opportunity in the shared appreciation mortgage space, right, where people are in their home, they don't want to move, they have a ton of equity, but they don't have a good income, so they can't make a debt payment on like a HELOC. So, well, what if you just gave them a bunch of money in exchange for some of the equity and the upside in their home, right? We all know that there's companies out there like that now, but Splitero has been killing it and just raised a Series B. Again, just another kind of success story. It feels, maybe there is no better feeling as a leader than watching others grow.
I think, in retrospect, it's obviously super rewarding. It's like the student becomes a teacher, and like the person you believed in and poured into did something amazing even past you. But I think in the moment, especially in your own leadership journey, that can be kind of scary. So, and I've talked to other business owners, and specifically in the REI space, that are like, I don't want to build my own competition. I don't want to train my own competition. And there's almost like this internal withholding of your own team because you're afraid that they're just going to take everything from you and leave you. And so I've felt that way too. I'm like, what's preventing anybody from just competing with me? Like, do I need to have all these non-competes? And, I think, I went through that emotional exercise of deciding if this is a good thing or a bad thing and where the line is with your team kind of spinning things off.
Yeah.
I think in the end, like you want the cream of the crop that wants to build, and the longer that you're together, the better. And it's your job as a leader to create the environment for them to rise with you. And then when they're no longer to move on. But how did you work through that internal scarcity mindset and fear of losing people and the investment of your leaders?
Yeah, I don't know how it happened necessarily, but I just I've always had an abundance mindset. I've just never allowed myself to get into scarcity mode, and I think, and I'm at the extreme of it, and there are moments where scarcity is important, and where protecting IP and these sorts of things really are important. And I just say I'm not the guy to come to for advice on that. I'm not good at that. Like I'm so open to sharing ideas and open to collaboration and open to letting people go off and do their own thing that I probably, again, am on the opposite side of that spectrum. So I don't know where I got it per se, but one of the ways that I've gotten comfortable with that just inevitability, like it's going to happen, is I'll invest in it so then I can make some upside too. So yes. I really like seeding those entrepreneurs because I'm like, man, I'd love to make money on your effort instead of, all my own. But the other is typically if you build a really good relationship and that ends up becoming the path for them, they'll give you heads up. They'll make the transition much easier than somebody that, became disgruntled over a couple years and, is just going to go switch to another job and they just leave you with the bag, they leave you hanging. I think it's a better outcome that people move on because they do. I'd say the average notice I've had from people that have gone off to start their own businesses is probably 4 to 6 months. They aren't surprising you with that news because you're the one who helped them in a lot of ways get to that point. They're looking for advice on what to do next and how to do it. And so you kind of see it coming. So maybe that's something that makes people feel a little more comfortable, that it's not this, oh my gosh, what do I do without this great person? It's, wow, that was a beautiful thing. Now they're helping me, backfill them and move on.
I love that.
I think for myself, I think of like, what do I want, right? What do I want for people and what do I want for myself and for my business? And ideally, if I'm trying to be a good leader, I want what's best for you and I want what's best for the company. And in order for either one of those to succeed, like I have to give you the proper resources. We have a new employee now that we're training and it's like, oh, what do we want to give him? Like cut his knees out from underneath him and he will not grow. He will not succeed. He will fail and we will fail. Like we are all on the ship and riding together. I think somebody one time said it like, oh, they've got to earn my trust. And, I think it was Eric Brewer that said, F that. Like you need to earn their trust. They just gave up everything they were doing to come on board your ship. Like the trust is there. You've got to give them the resources to succeed.
Totally.
We're in an entrepreneur role. Like it's a risk. You're taking a risk and a gamble on the business to succeed. And every time you hire somebody for them to succeed, and you got to hedge that risk from the get-go.
I think something that's helped me get over that scarcity mindset too, that I had 10 years ago, was that this is really freaking hard. Like you can't I could give somebody the literal blueprint of our business. Here is everything. And they won't do it. Like it's not just the idea. It's not just that piece, or the aspiration to run your own business or the piece of that they know from you. Like it takes so much hard work and you're going to bleed for a decade, right? Like it's just not easy. And I think if you understand how hard business is, you want to talk about ideas more and get more people on board and share more and like recruit people to the vision because you need them. And it's way better to do that, to actually execute on the idea that you are passionate about to start a company over versus worrying about somebody taking a piece of it and running off. Like, for sure. Good luck to you, right? It's really hard to do that.
In some ways, exactly. It's like, good luck. Draw more attention to this space by trying to raise money, and then fail and then make me look even better. Not a bad outcome. There's also a difference between starting a business, so a true entrepreneur starting a business, raising money, growing it, and somebody who takes over a business, private equity, that sort of thing. And you mentioned blueprint. And what I would say is people that are looking for like a blueprint or a shortcut or something like that, generally that mindset works really well with an existing business where like you think you can take it from X to Y by implementing some system or some whatever. The process or the system for starting a business and becoming an entrepreneur, there's only one ingredient that matters, and it's passion. It's personal passion for the issue. So if you don't have that, I can give you every single manual, like you're saying, every single blueprint, every line of code. You may get somewhere with it, but I promise you will not beat me because I actually care about the thing. If you're looking for more of a transactional type of relationship with business, I think it's more, there's one that's existing. It's inefficient. It was started by somebody who had the passion, but just maybe doesn't have the expertise for scale. Great. Go apply some playbooks and stuff to that. But don't try to start a business de novo if you don't actually care about it.
100%. Especially in competition, because I'm about to bleed over this. Like I will drag my bloody body 10 years over this because I'm so passionate about it. That's real hard to compete with.
It is. It's impossible. It is literally impossible to have a sustainable advantage over somebody like that. You may, even if you're intellectually smarter, better capitalized, you can create a temporary advantage. You can't sustainably beat that person.
Going with sustainability, back to what we were talking about before, the idea of like human capital, right? So it's great. We can have like you got to have staying power in business and with your people, right? So I think it's easy sometimes to come up with like, hey, here's a new annual goal or something, right? And we can make something shiny to kind of get people on board for that moment. But then you leave the meeting. Like, how do you keep people with your level of passion to be able to be, like you said, push them harder? Like if you could push somebody harder for like a day, right? But like to get that sustainable 365 days of sustainment, of getting more out of the people. What are some of the other tips and tricks to keep people rolling?
Yeah. Well, when you find some, let me know. I don't know that I really know. I think there are some inherently motivated people, and then there's everybody else. I think it's like, I don't know, 2%, 1%. Like it's something, maybe it's the double Pareto. It's like point some percent of people that actually have the intrinsic motivation. And I think about my 9-year-old. I mean, if somebody liked golf, for example, and they just said, hey, I really want to get good at it. But they weren't willing to, like my 6-year-old at the time, who's now 9, but he took a passion he's 5. He took a passion at 5 for golf. He would wake me up at 5:30 in the morning, fully dressed, wanting to go play golf. So you can't coach that, you can't teach it. There's just something about people. So I'd say start with those people and just literally avoid everybody else. And then the one tactic though, because even those people do tend to get down on themselves, the cycles hit them, it's just tough. I tell a lot of stories. I think customer stories are, you can tell people to do something, you can tell them to feel some way, or you can make them, feel that way. And the eliciting of the emotion for me is more of a story than anything. So telling customer stories, there was a great one at one point. We've always been very against as a business model, like suing sellers who, break contract, right? It's kind of a common practice within the business, or at least within some people in the business. And we've just always been like, that's terrible. Well, anyway, we came across a seller in the Inland Empire in California who was being sued by a very well-known large brand name in the business. And I was just so floored by it that we ended up backing them legally. We ended up helping them win and keep their home and do all that. Now I did it because I cared about that person, and I just thought it was wrong. And I anything that's wrong, you can't look the other way. But how many times I've told that story internally when things are getting tough? Like when we lose a deal because somebody, circumvented us, or some seller decided to go with someone else for $2,000 more. I just remind them of the story, and it locks them back in, and it reminds them why we're here. So I'd say that's probably the most effective tool is the story.
Oh, it's so well said. And I think that intrinsic motivation is so much more impactful than extrinsic with, reward-based system, which, is nice surface level, but then it's never enough in the end. I think intrinsic motivation cannot really be taught, but it can definitely be nurtured. And we at the beginning of the conversation, we talked about, how we're raised and how that impacts us and how, we get out there and perform, and the opinion we take with our children and how we rear them. I think that getting our kids to be intrinsically motivated is probably the most powerful thing that we can do. Like your example of your son waking you up, like he's intrinsically motivated. And anyway, I just made me think about back when I was in school and like doing sports. I don't know, I did I was never super great at sports, but I liked track and I liked soccer and whatever. I did all these different things. And one of my friends was on my team, and I can't even remember which sport it was, but they're like, yeah, I'm here because if I complete the season, I get a new CD, which is funny now because there's no CDs, but like he was only competing and only in the sport because of the CD, not because he actually cared or wanted to do it. And in the end, like you just kind of begrudgingly go through your season. You're like, I don't really care. And it's not like you're obviously not going to be a great player versus the person who was like, no, I want to be here. I'm excited to be here. I want to do that. So something Zach and I have tried to do with our kids too is like encourage that intrinsic reward system with our kids of like how good it feels to win or how good it feels to do something you said you were going to do or to be independent. Like, I don't know, like make a cake, like go get a, thing out of the cabinet and like make a cake. And like, it feels good to have done something like that for yourself instead of just receiving a slice of cake. I don't know, like little lessons like that, I think can help us grow leaders as well. And hopefully well-rounded people in the end. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that yes, just to like piggyback on that for a second. I think in that case of the parent who's incentivizing the kid to do something that clearly they don't really want to do. I mean, what a shame, right? Because you're robbing them of the most important asset in the world, which is time. Like they could. I think your job as a parent definitely is to give kids exposure to enough things that they can find their passion. Because every kid has a passion. There's no person I've ever met in my life that if you ask them, if you really dig deep enough, they don't actually have something they're passionate about. It's just very few times that it actually overlaps with what they're doing. And I think that's because it was a childhood thing. Like the dad really liked baseball, and so he was coaxing the kid with XYZ to do baseball. What a shame, He could have been doing music. He could have been doing math. He could have whatever. One other thing I'll say that something you said made me think. There's this great quote, and I'm not exactly sure how to feel about it. Sometimes I really agree with it. Sometimes I don't. I'd be curious how you two feel about it. Is that the most insidious form of child neglect is a parent who's not pursuing their dreams? Have you heard this?
I have not heard that quote, but yeah, that hits.
It hits because it's, on the one hand, because I've had to stop and ask myself, like, is enough? What's enough? Should I stop sort of giving a lot of time to my work so that I can give more time to my kids? And I think it really, among other things, it comes down to that question of, are you leading by example, and how important is that? Is it important for it to be a current event versus like, I did this thing in the past, and so trust me, I'm cool and I know what I'm doing? Or is it important that it's relevant? Because if it is important that your child sees that, that marginal minute of time you could have spent with him actually was more important spent showing him the way, then you probably shouldn't stop. Like, you should be very sensitive to how you stop and when you stop really putting in work.
Yeah, I think I tend to get a lot of crap because I sit on the fence a lot of times with things, right? Because I think oftentimes two things are true. And I think what it comes down to for me is the idea of there's multiple dreams. So which dream am I pursuing? Because in one way I have a dream of growing this company to new heights and new levels. And I also have a dream that my kids want to live close to me when they, close enough that we can, visit each other and that we all have a relationship together and that we can have, birthdays together with grandkids and I can, force my grandkid into baseball. No, just kidding. He can do whatever he wants. But be there for whatever.
I knew that was
But to be there for whatever that grandkid wants to be, right? So I think in life, oftentimes we're pursuing two dreams or multiple dreams at one time. So what holds true in that moment? And I think, discernment and harmony and balance, however we talk about it, is what's difficult. And kind of like one of your answers that you gave earlier. It's like, it may not be the best answer because it's not very, it's not very sided, but I think it's very true in the moment of like, all right, what does this mean? What are the implications of this in how do I pursue multiple dreams at one time? But I do think the heart of it does mean that like I shouldn't give up all of my own hopes and dreams just to be there around for the kids. I mean, we can go deep with all this stuff. Identity. A lot of entrepreneurs probably struggle because they have their identity in their business. What happens when that business goes away? Our business I put a little bit more on autopilot a couple years ago, where I kind of lost even some of my identity, like not into the business, but maybe the business wasn't even about me. And then I'm just a stay-at-home dad kind of doing some of these things. And then it's like, those kids are going to leave. And then what? My identity is going to be I'm stay-at-home dad getting this things done. Like, no, I need to be, to be a good dad. I need to be preparing them to be like, you don't need me. No, you need to go fly. You are years away from flying on your own. How do I prepare that? And so that's a long-winded, probably confusing gray matter response to like, how do we pursue multiple dreams, but not giving things up just for the children to show them by example.
I mean, it was a luxury to be able to do that, right? To have the business on autopilot for a few years. But like your point, I don't think you teach I don't think we teach our kids anything by not being out there in the world and trying to build something or working towards something. Like the life of just hanging at the house and vacationing is not a very fulfilling thing, like in the end. And I don't think that's the right thing to teach the kids.
I think that this concept of like, what example are you setting for your child and how much do you link your identity to sort of them, and is that fair, but I know I'm going to kind of bring up a very obvious topic and something that, everyone loves to talk about, which is artificial intelligence. But in this context, I actually think it's important because I think what a lot of us are feeling is that the most important human quality moving forward as AI develops and as robotics develop and physical intelligence develops, is that agency is going to be one of the most important parts of the human experience. Is basically, we've had things done for us. The more that we have things done for us, the more that decisions are made for us, that problems are anticipated for us, the less agency we have. And I do think as a culture we've been declining in our sense of agency. That needs to change really fast, because it's all going to be about agency and the ability to make your own decisions and to impose your own will on things again, or you're going to get owned by I think this wave in a lot of ways. So I think showing kids whatever we do that they have agency and that's got to be critical. And so however we like model that for them is going to be more and more important.
Yeah, I think it's funny. We already see little hints of this with like, make sure you do some crosswords or some brain puzzles so that you can prevent dementia, right? Like we all, it's already part of our life, and the more dependency we have on things around us to complete tasks, I think the more our brain turns off. And I think it's scary to watch the kids on an iPad on YouTube, and we are so guilty. I'm not up here on a high horse saying my kids aren't on tech, but you definitely notice a difference in them when they've sat for an hour and watched like multiple short YouTube shorts, and like their creative brain is completely off. Like they're just consumed, and we really are turning into consumers, like from every facet of our life. And teaching your kids to go out and like feel something, think something, be bored enough to make something, I think is going to be more and more important.
I think going into, I'm thinking about your comment about agency, and there's a line between like, I can bring a question to AI and get some really good answers and feedback and improvement of my own thinking. But at what point do I keep just going? You know what I mean? Do I keep going back to there and then say that information is good? Why don't I decrease the time that I think about it on my own and just go immediately to AI to be able to get the answer to now I don't have a thought on my own. Exactly. Why bother thinking? My kids will literally do this with bully, right? I got a bully at school. What do? Somebody just roasted me at school. How can I roast them back? I got a fifth grader that's like practicing roast and, brought to her by Chat GPT to be prepared to go back to school with.
That's a great example. And there's going to be I mean, as AI develops, right, it develops on data, and I do think there's just going to be inherent biases in the way that it develops itself. There has to be. It's going to learn in a direction, and it's going to learn and so I think, if that direction is inconsistent with your morals or your ethics or this or that, like, then you better know where to draw the line and how to not go to it for every answer, because if you end up allowing it to think for you rather than like enable and augment you, if you allow it to think for you, it's going to be a dark reality. And I think we've been trained. Software took a lot of that agency away from us because it was a discrete, distinct thing that you were given and then you implemented, and it was like that's it. There's no thinking involved. Boom. And I think we're moving away from business tools and personal tools that are like kind of purpose built and out of a box to something that really is dynamic, and that again for that reason requires agency. Like, I think there's been this amazing invention of AI, but the innovation that is required to make it good for you, it's different than software. It actually requires thought and molding and agency again. So, yeah.
How do you bring your teams through an exercise like that, or lead through this right now? Maybe at home too. I think it's relevant personally and professionally. But how are you guiding your people through that?
Well, there's another guy. I'm a big quote guy. It's like I'm big frameworks and quotes, and maybe the more responsibility you get, you kind of have to like distill things down just to even have any semblance of normalcy in your head. There's a great quote. It says like a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. So know, go, show. Yeah, I think I got that right. And I forget, there was a book, I think John Maxwell, I forget the book, but it came from that. So I guess I think about like, first it comes down to having conviction that you have to take a stance on something. Mm-hmm. If people are going to lead, you have to be flexible, but you have to take a stance. So knowing the way is that first one. And I think that taking the time to think about how is this going to impact us, not just today, tomorrow, but like really the 3-5 year horizon. That's your job as a leader, is you got to know the way and then be willing to be flexible on it. But you got to have some stake in the ground. Number 2 is then going the way. You got to show them that if that way involves adopting a new tool or whatever it is, then you got to go that way. Like you can't just tell them to. People will not, right? It's like kids. They do not listen to what you're saying. They watch what you're doing. You got to go the way. And then you got to, by showing the way for me means like teaching it. It's one thing to lead by example, and it's another thing to actually sit down and help people think through, the problem, what you're asking them to do. So I think being hands-on. So anyway, again, the framework, that's how I think about it, I guess.
I think that's fantastic and challenging. I'll give a really specific example that I kind of can contradict myself on, because I think this is sometimes easier said than done. But okay, so the idea of market research versus like echo chamber versus creative thinking. And I think the problem now is like we don't have enough time creative thinking. Like just sitting in a room just talking, because we have access to so much. And market research has literally never been easier with AI now, but like even the advent of internet, market research is so easy. I think that there is a natural tendency to spend more time market researching on what's already been done and how somebody else did it than thinking about in your own box and like being creative. So for a specific example is competitor research. Right? Like, okay, we obviously have to some degree know what our competitors are doing so that we can continue to differentiate. But okay, well, that investment company is like this, and this is why we're better. Like to some degree, you kind of have to do it. Or somebody on your team has to have some awareness. I've always had such a hard time doing that. Like, I don't want to. I don't want to know what any other competitor is doing. Because I know that that will become the box that we have to operate in. Like that's the market I don't even want to be tempted to look at anybody else. I just want to be in my own creative corner, which can be very contradictory here, because like I want to be creative and hey, that's good. But on the other end, you kind of have to know what's happening in the world and can't just be in a creative corner. Curious on your stance on market research versus creative time. Yeah.
I'm more in your direction, I think, than the other direction. I tend to want to stay heads down and, not be willing to have some of the latest competitors' innovation really influence our roadmap or what we're doing or how we're thinking. The times I found competitive research to be most valuable were, and I think Zach was asking me earlier about keeping people motivated, and is actually for that reason. Again, it's kind of back to telling a customer story. It's telling
Customers,
a competitor story.
exactly.
And it's we use the analogy, we got to go outside of these four walls, because you do become, I think, as powerful as the internal view can be, it can actually become the thing you don't want. You're fighting against is the echo chamber. You don't want to become your own echo chamber. So
Exactly.
somehow you got to balance those two things. And so bringing in that third party narrative, what's going on out there, can spark innovation and creativity. It can also create a really powerful we versus them narrative, which generally speaking, I'm very inclusive, but like that in business is powerful. So
Yeah.
I'm like you. I don't want to read Business Insider every day. I don't want to read TechCrunch every day. I don't want to. I want to commit to a path and go. And maybe it's back to that. You're setting this 4S process up, and part of it is the sensing and seeking has got to be sometimes competitive and market based. And maybe that's your time to check in on it. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't like to be influenced too much too often by what's going on outside.
I think the cincher there is the customer. Like that is who should impact your creative time, and that should drive your differentiators and your market research, is really staying as close as you humanly can to that customer that you're trying to serve. And they'll tell you like, hey, this is what I'm doing right now, or like, this is who I talked to before, and this is what my problem is now, right? Like let them bring that to you, because I feel like that's the juice that will help you be the most creative in the probably the most productive way.
And it's a great filter, because if your customer's not talking about it, then it doesn't matter how cool or creative or sexy the headline was. They aren't adopting it. So
that's true.
That's actually a pretty clean filter. Is just stay close to your customer, and you'll kind of have the competitive filter, and what gets through will be important. Wow, that's a new book. We just created that. Just that topic right there is a book.
The customer filter. I like it.
The customer filter. Trademark it. Buy the URL.
Done.
Hurry up.
Go ahead, Zach.
No, I mean, I was just thinking, would be kind of remiss. I think a lot of times in business, people talk about the idea of partnerships, and you obviously have had successful opportunities to become co-founders. And I think, there's opportunities where that works really well, and opportunities where that's probably not the best fit and option for people. I think it would be remiss if we didn't, talk about your experience a little bit with that, and kind of if you have some words of wisdom to leave us with in terms of guidance of like, co-founders work offered, really well for these type situations versus, what you've learned along the way.
Yeah. This is a very personal, I think, question. Not that I'm saying in a good way, not like,
and cuts the podcast.
Personal here, bro. No. What I mean is, I think it's personal to, how everybody's going to attack this a little bit differently. My response is a very personal one, which is, I am a co-founder. I am not a founder. I just am. Just like I don't wake up and go to the gym on my own. Like I need a trainer or a gym buddy. The most fit I've ever been in my life is when I've always had somebody. And I think it has something to do with, I remember I went vegan for a while with my wife, and it wasn't because we were excited about the health benefits or the longevity. It was because we were just pissed off about animal cruelty. We were just tired of it. And that, I think, finding an external reason rather than an internal reason is powerful. So for me, a co-founder is an external reason to want to be successful, to want to be creative, to need to show up every day. There's probably other reasons that I'm a co-founder, not a founder. I really need somebody to do things with. It's probably I'm very collaborative. I like to communicate. I love to brainstorm. So I can't really speak to people that like, what does it take to be a founder, like solo on your own? I really don't know. I think I've always thought, man, I started Sundae, right, and we were 50-50 with my co-founder, who was the former CFO of Airbnb and brilliant guy. And I just always felt like 1 + 1 is always going to equal more than 2 for me in good partnerships. So I'd rather take half of something because the half is going to be more than the whole. And but that comes back to, I think, the abundance mentality. I think there's just a lot of those threads that come together that make me more of a co-founder. I think that's the way to go. If you're going after something big and hairy, you need great people around you. It's going to be hard to do it on your own.
I think that's super powerful. I don't know a lot of people that I think would answer the same way. I think maybe that's a pride thing. I don't know, but I feel like what I hear most out there is the kind of the joy in being a founder, the solo person that's doing whatever. But I think that's really powerful.
One thing that came to mind there is it hard to convince someone to join you? Yes, very hard. Is it hard to convince capital to join you? Very hard. You know this as well as anybody. I think that maybe some people that are just solo founders are unwilling to face the reality of how hard it is to collaborate and to bring people into their orbit. And so they stop and convince themselves they don't need to. Well, that's convenient, and it may work for a little while, but look, I tell you, I mean, you can't do anything if you're not good at selling people and capital on joining your vision. And I think that if you can't pass that test, you can still found something, but it's probably not going to be very successful. But there's also examples of very successful solo founders. So I don't know what it is, but yeah, not me.
Well, I'll say I think the best business decision I ever did was hire a board. An advisory board, and then a board of directors. And you know, I'm the sole founder. I mean, Zach, of course, is part of this. You just can't, your spouse is a part of this no matter what business we're talking about. But I'm the sole founder of Left Main, and that was a detriment. Like I hit a ceiling, you know, a couple of years in. I was like, I need help. I need like a board. And that was the best unlock I ever did was surrounding myself with people to collaborate with, you know?
Yeah. My co-founder and I always joke that when we would go into pitches, we would, it was the ham and the egg, and we didn't know who was which at any given time. But, you know, he would think of something that I didn't think of, and vice versa. And I think, and like you said, bringing in that board, it's forcing you to be accountable. I think that's what partnerships and that's what co-founders do, is there's that accountability piece, that trainer, the gym trainer. It's, you know, and I think accountability is not like a crutch. I think it's a very, very smart tool.
Well, I want, before we end, I really want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what you're doing with Sundae, because I think it's brilliant. And I want, you know, people to know how to get a hold of you or see what's happening with Sundae too. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so Sundae is a membership model. You can think about it similar to like a franchise, if you will, but we're calling it membership. So we're looking for existing experienced operators who want to add a zero to their business and just don't really know exactly how, or would just prefer, kind of the last point, to partner with somebody maybe who's done it before and who can help them do it. So we, between the Sundae brand, our advertising systems, and then our technology stack, including tools that we've built ourselves as well as ones that we're partnering on with others like Left Main, we've brought sort of a business in a box that can help people take, again, an already existing successful business and add a zero. And we do it through, again, a just augmented direct-to-seller campaign where we're getting you more motivated seller leads and then giving you better tools to contract and monetize those leads in a way that you probably just wouldn't be able to do on your own. We've raised $165 million of venture capital. We've spent nearly $100 million just getting the advertising piece of the business right. So, so that's what we're looking for. It's to scale through partnerships with local people. We're now in many cities, and we're hoping to be in the next 12 months kind of pseudo nationwide, and in 24 completely nationwide. And so if you're a local operator that's listening that thinks, you know what, I probably could stand to learn more about how Sundae could help me add a zero, we'd love to hear from you.
one of the cool things, just to brag on you for a second, that I think you're doing that really, really helps operators is the marketing piece, and essentially even expanding on what they're currently doing. Like you're matching their marketing spend and helping them with the marketing itself. So essentially they're doubling their effort for the same amount of spend. I just think that's super cool.
Yeah.
Or doubling the results with the same amount of spend, I should say.
Yeah. I think
Really cool.
there's another framework that I have around just real estate operations. And I call it the 6 F's. And it's the 6 things you have to do as a property investor. And the question is, do you do it yourself or does somebody else do it? But it's got to get done. One is finding the deal, right? Find it. The next, figure it. You got to underwrite it, figure out if it's the right deal. Fund it, fix it, fill it, and flip it. Now, you don't always do the fill part, but generally you have to do all the other ones, and sometimes you're filling it with a tenant. So those are the 6 F's. And I was actually just in New York on a keynoting a real estate AI conference. And what I was sort of impressing on people is I believe that of all those 6 F's, while they're all going to be impacted by artificial intelligence, the thing in the next 6 to 24 months that is completely going to change, and then I think a lot of other brands in this space are falling behind on, is the finding it. It's the marketing and advertising and the way that things are changing from search to discovery with AI. And if you don't feel like you're ahead of that curve, then I promise you are much further behind than you think. If you don't feel like you're ahead, you're probably way further behind. And that's one of the things that we offer is, we not only are a technology company in our DNA and have raised a lot of money, but, on our board is the chief strategy officer, as an example, of First American, the largest reseller of public data in the country for real estate. So the fact that we have the kind of access we do to new data sets, new ways of thinking, the idea is let us find all that stuff and implement it for you, and you be the local operator expert that we could never be in, 100 cities across the country.
It's so exciting. So
thanks.
if somebody wants to learn about that, where do they go?
I would say if you want to learn about it, just send us an email at membership@sundae.com, and we'll send you just kind of a quick overview of what we're talking about. And if you're interested, we'll send you a quick application. We'd love to learn more about your business, and then hop on a call and see if it's right for you. We are being very selective with the program you just mentioned, Stephanie, and other things, but including that advertising matching program where people that, let's say somebody puts up $30,000 a month in marketing spend and we match it with another 30. That's really an early adopter kind of feature and benefit. So I'd say if you're interested, this is going to happen in your city for sure sometime. And if you want to be the person to do it and get some of that advertising benefit, let us know.
And for those that are listening, how do you spell Sundae?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is Sundae. And I'd say a topic for the next podcast would be how we came up with that name. But for now, it's membership at sundae.com, sundae.com.
Oh, dang it. I want to know. All right, we'll have to take it offline. Sorry,
Beautiful.
folks.
No, we'll do another one. I got so many more questions. Yeah, Josh, I appreciate having you on, man. You have been such a pleasure, wealth of knowledge, and such, we didn't dive too deep into like co-founding and partnerships, but there's, that opportunity with the membership. And I really think people need to think long and hard before they get into something, and listening to you, hearing your passion, your integrity, your purpose driven. I don't know a better guy to try to lock arms with. And so I appreciate having you on and wish you guys the best.
Yeah, well, we're
so
grateful
much.
for both of you, not just for this, but for the, speaking of partnership, the partnership between Sundae and Left Main. So I'm glad to be locking arms with both of you. So thanks for having me.